Okay, so we're going to have a look at how you can really rev up a starter for your sourdough. Over here I've got like my kind of big batch, although we just made pancakes out of it, which were pretty awesome. So I'm going to take 2 pots here. I'm actually going to give one to our neighbour because they're looking to start doing some sourdough baking. I'm just going to go in with 75 grams of starter in each. 75. Then bring that to 150. Right, so we've got 150, so we've got 75 in each of those. I'm then going to do same again with flour. I don't know how you guys are doing, but we haven't been to the shop in 12 days. We're just doing all this stuff at home. Growing yeast, baking breads, making drinks, everything we've done so far, we have managed to do just with what's laying around. 75. That's 150 again. Still see the scales. 130. 5. Close enough. 148. With a bit of dust. 145 minus the dust. So then we're going to go back in there, and I'm going to use just slightly less water than I added flour. So let's put 60 in each. $63. 129, right, 65 and 63. 65 and 66 and 63. And then we're going to give that a good stir, just with maybe the back of a wooden spoon. Just stir that until it's nice and even. Do the same with the next one. And then we'll come back and have a look in about 3 hours' time. Here we are about 3.5 hours later. You can see how this has grown in size, and it's all nicely puffed up, and you can see it's kind of lumpy, which means it's still on its way up. I mean, we could leave that a bit longer. It could probably still grow for another hour, but there's a good test for your starter to see if it's ready, and it's called the float test. So it's gonna chuck that in there, and if that's floating, which it is, then that's ready. So we can put that together. And what we're going to need to do, you're going to need to get your scales out. I quite often when I bake, I eyeball things, but if you want to really, we're going to make this process easier and more precise. So take the scales out. We're going to do a 500 gram loaf of bread. We managed to make it 12 days of isolation before we had to go to the supermarket, and now we have had to go. We've been out and we've got some flours that are better suited to sourdoughs. We've got an organic white flour, which is going to be like the base of the sourdough. We're going to use 350 grams of that. Yeah, 325. 335. So I've gone 335. What I'm really doing is just making sure that that's kind of the base of the sourdough. And then I'm going to go in with a buckwheat flour. I'm going to bring that up to 400, so that'll be like 65 grams there. So that's 400. 400. So we've gone 335 with a organic white flour, up to 400 with our buckwheat flour. And I've got spelt flour, and I'm going to put 100 grams of spelt flour in. And what this is going to do, because we've got this live culture, we're going to feed it really well. It's going to have it's going to get a bunch of vitamins out of these brown flours, and it's going to add to the flavour that you're going to get at the end. And here we've got our live yeast, our sourdough starter that we've been pumping up, and I've got a previous video or previous part of the video shows you how that works. So this is all like nice and risen. It's still fluffy in there. We've done a water test to check that it floats. And now, so we're going to hold on to that for a minute, because we need to let this rest with water for about 45 minutes. This is just to let the proteins kind of come together. And we're now gonna hydrate our flour, but we're going to hydrate it at a rate of 75%. And this 75% is going to give us quite a wet, sticky dough, but also give us a nice airy dough. So 75% of 500 grams. If you work it on, it normally works in a kilo. So if you did a kilo of flour, that would be 750 grams, and half of that, 500 grams of flour, would make 75% of that is going to be 375 grams. So we need 375 grams of water. And this I'm going to take my time with, just to make sure that we don't go over. There we go, 375 grams. So now that we've got our 375 grams, we're just going to mix that together. I don't actually want my starter in there yet, so I'm just going to whip this off the spoon. So we're just going to stir that together. And that's going to make that quite a wet mix. So as we work that in, we're really this is not kneading. We're not going to spend too much time doing this, but we're just trying to get that dough, not even dough, but combine that, get it wet, whip that off, put our flour back together, and now we're just going to leave that for about 40 minutes. Cover it, leave it, come back in 40 minutes time. So this has now been resting for about 45 minutes. That has given, so it was about 75% saturation, as I said before, so 75% the weight of flour is water. And it's given time for the gluten to kind of activate. So now, let's go scrape everything in. And we're going to add 15% weight of flour in our sourdough starter, which is still nice and active. It's still kind of like puffed up. You can see that it's nice and puffed up, looks billowy. There's loads of activity going on there. So that's, I'm just going to pour in. So if it was a kilo, that'd be 150 grams. We're making a half kilo flour mix. So that'd be 75 grams of starter. There you go, 75 grams. So that is our starter sat on our flour water mix. I'm now going to just mix that starter in. And now we're going to start our fermentation. We've got our veg fermentations going, we've got our rice fermentation going. This is going to be our flour for our sourdough. And you notice how wet this is. It's going to be super, super sticky. And now what we're going to do is we're going to stretch and fold. So just pull up, start pulling from each side, and just keep doing this. Spend a couple of minutes doing this kind of like stretch and fold. And you're going to want to do this every half an hour for 2 hours. So you're going to end up doing it maybe 5 times. So do it once at the beginning, then after 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, and after 2 hours. And by the end, it will start to look completely different. So just stretch, fold, stretch again, fold over. Just keep repeating this, and we'll check back in a couple of hours. So by now you've been folding this every half an hour for about 2 hours, and it should be kind of holding its shape, like where it's been before, where it was just like a very wet mix, and through picking up, folding, picking up, folding, now it looks like a much more dough-like structure. Just keep picking it up, fold it, pick it up, turn it over. Just keep doing this until you got to this point, and once you're here, it should be kind of behaving like one solid mass. And at this point, you can then you can keep it at room temperature and leave it to rise for a couple of hours or maybe 4 hours. But here it's quite late, so we're going to put this away. Or in fact, we're going to cover it. And being in the mountains, we're just going to put it outside because it's going to be just above 0 outside tonight. So I'm going to cover it. I'm going to leave it outside. I'm going to pick it up tomorrow morning. So we've been working on stretch and fold every half an hour for about 2 hours. We've now got something that is resembling a dough. We're going to get ready to go for our final rise. So once you've got to this point, you've got like a nice consistent dough pulling away from the bowl, and if you yank that, it comes straight out. It's like it's stuck to itself. So we've got this, it's got nice and smooth, silky, we've lost all of our lumps. And I'm going to pull that out now. There comes our dough. Goes onto our work surface. And a bit of flour around that. And I'm just going to start putting this in. Kind of make it more of a dough ball kind of shape. Once we've pulled this in, we're going to rest it for another half an hour before going on to the final stage. So, there we go, that's all kind of coming together. Roll that up. Plenty of flour on the bench. And that, we're just going to get flour and then just cover that and rest it for 30 minutes. So at this point, once you've rested your dough, you start to work it a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start folding our dough in, then rolling it up. And what you're trying to do here, at this point, you're going to start working with your dough. You're going to kind of get like a feel for how you want your dough to come together. And this way you're going to practice a few times to get to a point where you feel like your dough is where you want it. You see how we've gone from what we had at the very beginning, which was just like a pile of sludge, and we've got to this point now where we're really starting to work with the dough. And I'm just going to do this a few times, pulling it in. And you can feel straight away that starts to tighten up. So the first time it was really just sort of loose and floppy. And at this point, don't use too much flour because you want it to still stick to itself. And here, it's really getting firmer already. And how long you do this for is really up to you. But I'm going to repeat this process a few times until I've got a really nice smooth dough that feels like it's kind of holding its shape together. And once we've done that, we'll be ready to put into our raising basket. I've kind of made a makeshift one here with a tea towel, and I'm going to dust that very liberally with flour. And what you need to remember though is that the shape that's in the bottom there is going to be the top. You're going to flip it out, and it's going to go down to a piece of grease-proof paper, and then that is going to have to go into a preheated Dutch oven, which we'll show you next. I'm going to do this a couple more times, and then we'll check back in. I've been repeating that process for a few times now. I'm getting to a point where I am starting to feel like this is ready. Just going to fold it in one more time, and then as this dough comes together, just try and keep it sticking to the bench at the last point, because now that you've got this nice stretched surface, the last thing you'd want to do is tear that before it goes in. So we try and bring that bottom together, and that feels like quite a nice firm dough. It's firm, but it's elastic, and it feels kind of spongy. I'm gonna just add a little bit of spice to mine. So here I've got some chopped rosemary and cardamom. Bottoms come right together. So I'm just going to roll that. Let's have a look at that. Now when we bake that, that's going to pick up those lovely aromas. Here, so I want to stick to my bench, and then just give it a minute on the bench, and that's going to allow the that last fold in the bottom to come together. Give it a minute to stick. You see that nice dough we've got there? I feel like we're going to get a nice sourdough from that. And so here we've got our basket, which is going to be our final proof. You want to liberally coat this with flour, 'cause you also don't want this to stick. And so the surface that's going down is going to be the top. So we're going to flip that out the other way around. And at that point, it's going to be ready to go in the oven. You want to have the oven going for a good half an hour before you want to bake. So it's really, really nice, raging hot oven. You want to have your Dutch oven inside, because it's going to be baked with a lid on. So that's all super well heated before you go in. And then the next step we'll show you in the next segment. So at this point, I'm just going to do a quick poke test to see how our dough is looking. So what you want is just like a little bit of rebound. See there, that goes down, it pops up, but not all the way. That's about what you want. So we're going to try and whack that in the oven now. So now we've dropped our dough into our pot, and that's just going to go in the oven for about 45 minutes. So after 45 minutes at 200, then we've turned the oven off and left it to rest. And there we go, that's our sourdough. That looks about right.